Do you want to know what paid family leave, the rise of fascism in America, have to do with each other? It's interesting. There's an episode of the Daily Podcast today. I'll put it over here. Or from yesterday, that the parents are not all right. And this is about the Surgeon General's warning that parents are struggling in America. And they just lightly touch on this idea. It's a good podcast. You should listen to the episode. But they briefly touch on this idea that post-World War in Europe, they had this real up-close experience of fascism. And they were like, we don't want that. That's not a thing we want. And so they leaned in harder to the idea of the welfare state. And that we don't want to overemphasize rugged individualism because that leads down this path over here where there's a bunch of war and everybody dies. So instead, we're going to support families and people a lot more. And they ended up with maternity leave and paid family leave policies, amongst a bunch of other things, of course. America was not so worried about their population growth after there was booming population growth, and they were not so concerned about fascism because we didn't have it here in the same way. So we were like, no, everything is about whether or not you can do this shit yourself. That is our whole ethos as a country. As always, the other reason shit's fucked up in America is because of racism, right? So we didn't want to give paid maternity and family leave because, what if that meant black working mothers? And then they would get money from the government, and we can't do that. No. So to keep black families from getting it, we just gave it to basically no one. And we screwed everyone over. And we have increasingly become more and more hyper-focused on this idea that children need to be constantly parented, and also that it is 100% your job to be constantly doing that. And you cannot tell me that it is a coincidence that we are now seeing a huge rise in fascism in America when we have over again and over again, even after the pandemic, refused to create a support system for families, and especially parents and mothers in particular, who we tell as a society collectively that they are the most responsible for how their children are doing in all the areas, right? The amount of intense guilt, shame, and anxiety that women in my office are experiencing when they are not with their children 100% of the time, or if their children ever have a hard feeling, or if they feel like they did something wrong, or they imagine someone near them might at some point eventually hurt them in some imagined way, is crushing. And I mean crushing. It is destabilizing. It is unsustainable. Why do you think people don't want to have babies anymore? Right? We're doing that at the same time that we're supporting actual laws and policies that put women's lives at risk in an entirely other way since Roe. So not only are you, if you accidentally get pregnant or whatever, and you're forced to carry that baby, your risk to your health already goes up exponentially. Then we're saying, okay, also if that becomes fatal, we're not going to do anything about it, depending on what state you live in. And then if you happen to carry to term and that child's okay and you survive, we're not actually going to do anything for you. We're not going to pay for education. We're not going to give you paid maternity leave. We're not going to give you paid family leave. We're not going to give you health care. You're on your own. Which is impossible. Humans are not built that way. That's not how this shit works. And yet we internalize it and we go, the reason why I'm having a hard time is probably me. It's probably because I'm not good at it. It's probably because I'm not trying hard enough. And if I can do one thing as a therapist working in reproductive mental health, it is to convince people that the reason they're having a hard time is not because they're bad at it. It's not because they're not trying hard enough. So you should listen to the podcast. You should read the book, The Mommy Myth. It's 20 years old now and still super good. I would love to see an update from 2024. And remember that the reason why you're having a hard time and why there's more fascism in America is because we wouldn't give paid family leave or healthcare or childcare in 1919 when we first asked for it. Because America.